my back. What we have here is a matter of humiliation and human kindness. Dumbbells. You leave me no other choice. You're welcome.
You're slowing down. Come on, cowboy. Bring it.
Corey, thanks for being on. This is a pretty dark day, and I just wanted to start by saying, do you have any new information for us on this terrorist attack brought about by Joe Biden's criminal regime and open border?
Benny, what I can tell you is that this is just another example of a person who is in this country and has overstayed their visa, who are committing crimes against Americans because of the policies of the left. And what we have seen are excuses on the left that this person came in legally on a B1, B2 visa and then was given a work permit and was a good person by all accounts until they lit an American citizen on fire. So, it's amazing that this person was a great person under all the accounts on the left until they go start attacking people who are out peacefully talking about the fact that they want to see hostages released. So once again, the left is blaming everybody but themselves for the policies of the previous 4 years because they know that they're on the wrong side. And by the way, Benny, why the hell doesn't the guy have a shirt on? I don't even understand this thing. Like, he's not exactly a good-looking, ripped-up guy. I mean, this guy's a complete lunatic, so go put a shirt on. But here's what I don't understand. At what point? Last week, we had a horrific killing in Washington, D.C. by a very young couple. And then I flew to Israel, Benny, and I met the family of one of those two victims. It was devastating. I had the chance to go and sit down and listen to their story, and it was so sad. You know what the family said? They were afraid to come back to Israel because of what has been taking place over there. They thought they were safe in Washington, D.C., and then these two young kids who were about to get married, get engaged in Israel, were gunned down like dogs by a lunatic and someone who should never have had the opportunity to do that. And what do we see this week? The same kind of thing. When you stand up for Israel, you are targeted, and we must do better as a nation.
So we know that thousands of known terrorists on the terrorist watch list flooded the country in waves over the last 4 years. What's the status report on that? How do we ratchet up these deportations?
Look, Benny, we can't get enough people deported out fast enough. What we've known is that we have sent out hundreds of people who the Biden administration had let in that's on what's called a KST list, or a known suspected terrorist list. Those people are being scooped up as quickly as possible. But the reality is, yes, they are the highest priority. But some say we've got 20 million people in this country illegally. That is just a massive amount of resources that are needed to go and find these people, to apprehend them, to house them, and then to put them on airplanes and send them out, particularly when we've got liberal judges like in Massachusetts that are precluding us from sending people back to their home countries. And a great example of that is this lunatic individual who's an MS-13, alleged MS-13 gang member from El Salvador, who they said, hey, don't deport back to El Salvador, even though he's an El Salvadorian resident, because he was fearful being a rival gang member. Well, look, there are no more gangs in El Salvador. What President Bukele has done down there has ridded that country of gangs. So now we should be able to deport these people. But what have these judges done? They've stepped in and said, no, these people have rights. They've come into our country illegally. They perpetrated crimes against Americans. And these leftist liberal judges are allowing these people standing up for the criminals as opposed to the American citizens. It's disgusting to me.
So there was a well-reported phone call last week that some key members of Team Trump, and I believe you were on that list, Stephen Miller also, were meeting with the heads of ICE and Border Patrol in order to ratchet up the deportations from 1,000 a day to 3,000 per day. How's that operation going?
Benny, listen, I will tell you this. Secretary Noam, Stephen Miller, our entire team is singularly focused on one thing. It started with first sealing the border through the Customs and Border Patrol agents. They have done a phenomenal job, about 99.8% reduction of border crossings. There's still onesies and twosies here and there, but nothing like what we saw during the Biden administration. So what are we doing now? We have implemented a whole of government approach, which is driving the liberals crazy. Just last week in Martha's Vineyard, we used a Coast Guard to go and transport illegals that we picked up back to the mainland so that we can house them and then ultimately deport them. So Stephen Miller, Secretary Noam, what they've said is we want 3,000 arrests a day. and 3,000 deportations a day. To put that in perspective, that is larger than any program that we have ever run as a nation, but we have the full support of the President of the United States, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Homeland Security, the Attorney General, the White House. Everybody is on board because they know that this is something that will fundamentally and radically change the direction of our country if we don't get these people out of our country. So for the first time in our nation's history, this entire federal government is working together to apprehend, house, and then deport these bad guys as quickly as possible. It's ramping up. Last week, we hit 2,000 arrests in a single day. We're sending them out on buses. We're sending them out on airplanes. We are following the rules, but these judges are killing us. They're stopping us from deporting these criminals back to their home countries because they say they have rights, which they don't actually have.
So speaking of rights, speaking of rights under attack, there's this video that went viral last week, since you mentioned Martha's Vineyard, and you know this part of the world quite well, Corey, of an elderly boomer lib lady saying that she's worried she's going to be deported next. And here's the video. She looks like she's lived in Martha's Vineyard for her entire life. Her family's probably been in America for 200 years. And she says, couldn't I be deported next? My question is, where would you deport her exactly?
Well, here's the thing, man. We don't deport American citizens. It's very simple. If you are an American citizen, this is your home. You don't get deported. I don't care if you've been in the country illegally for 1 day, 1 week, a year, 20 years, or 50 years. We're going to find you and we're going to send you out. So do yourself a favor. Self-deport. Go on what used to be called the CBP One app, now called the CBP Go Home app, and get the hell out of the country. Because if we find you, you're not coming back. And let me tell you something. We have empowered our ICE agents, our HSI agents, the entire whole of government task force, including in Florida, the National Guard, to go out and effectuate arrests, to do Title VIII detentions. And if we asked you if you have proof that you are a U.S. citizen and you don't, we will detain you and we will send you out of this country. So you know what? These people on Martha's Vineyard, what I used to call the beautiful people, the John Kerrys of the world, right, who only came to this country with 2 tons of gold, or in John's case, he married 2 tons of gold, right? That's what he did. So look, if you're an American citizen, you don't go anywhere. But if you're in the country illegally, get out because we will find you. I don't care if you own a landscaping company. I don't care if you own a construction company. Look what happened in Tallahassee last week. We started doing workforce enforcement raids and people were scattering like they were ants. You know why? Because we're going to find you and you do not belong in this country. And one crime committed against an American citizen by an illegal is one too many.
What do you say to the construction site owners and the companies that benefit off of exploitative labor, which is what this is? It's just low-key slavery. It's human smuggling and trafficking. It's engaging in human trafficking is what it is. What do you say to the companies there that like are so upset about the ICE raid in Tallahassee?
I say you should have hired Americans. Okay, that's how it works. You should have gone and checked the I-9 status of these people. Okay, the John Smiths of the world want to do work too, right? The Billy Johns of the world want to do the work too. So give people the opportunity. Look, when we have a level playing field, Benny, Americans can compete with anybody. But what happens is these employers want to hire people because they can get them at a reduced wage. They know that they're not going to stay very long. They know they can hold them under their thumb by making them work hours they shouldn't or do are in conditions that they shouldn't be. So go hire Americans and you won't have these problems. If you continue to hire illegals, whether you are a landscape company, a construction company, or anything in between, we will find you. We will be checking these things and we're going to be holding you accountable as well.
Yeah. I mean, at some point you have to go after the businesses that are keeping Mohammed employed, right? Like, so, you know, who's allowed, you know, so cut off all of the people who've overstayed their visas. This seems like pretty obvious. And then go after the businesses that keep paying them. And it seems like a pretty easy way. And if they can't get welfare, then that seems like a pretty easy way to cut the entire system off, right? Am I wrong about that, Corey?
You're not wrong. The problem is the businesses have, by and large, been on a path, right? That they're never held accountable. So once you start holding those business owners accountable and you start finding them and holding them responsible for what they're doing, which is allowing illegals to work in their business. Look, Benny, the reality is every person knows if the person working for them is illegal or not. Now, they want to turn a blind eye to it because they think it's cheaper labor and better. And then they want to call, the Department of Homeland Security and say, well, this guy here, Juan, is a great guy and he shouldn't be deported. Hey, nobody gets a pass. And Benny, I'll tell you this. We have fielded dozens, if not hundreds of calls from members of Congress who are supposed to be conservatives, or members of the U.S. Senate who are conservatives, who say, hey, the guy who cuts my grass is a great guy. Can you just look the other way? You know what the answer is? Absolutely not. We're coming for everybody. Workforce enforcement. We're going to stop at places. Look, you pull up at a Home Depot in Florida and there's 1,000 guys standing outside looking to do day work. I'll tell you what, ICE, go find them. Go scoop them up, go pick them up and get them out of the country, because only one of those guys does it take to get behind the wheel drunk and kill an American citizen who shouldn't have been here.
Yep, that's exactly right. You're seeing, of course, this logic used time and time again in the arrest of judges in New Mexico, for instance. He had Tren de Aragua members living with him. Is this correct? In New Mexico? This former Democrat judge? And his rationale was he's great at yard work. It's amazing. You'd think you were telling a joke, Corey, but you're not. That's the Democrat judge that was arrested said, I have the gang members with the teardrop tattoos and everything living with me because they're great at leaf blowing and cleaning my pool.
It's amazing. It just goes to show. Look, and it wasn't just New Mexico, unfortunately. It was also that judge in Minnesota, right? So you get the same thing. They think that they're doing a service and that they're holier than thou, that they don't have to follow the rules. So you know what happens? You start arresting these people, and I give immense amount of credit to Kash Patel and the FBI for going in and enforcing the rules that they're supposed to have, the rule of law, which every other American has to follow. If that were me or you, we'd be going to jail. But these guys allow Tren de Aragua, 18th Street gang members, right, to sit in their homes and to clean their yards and then to pay them in cash because it's easier for them and cheaper for them than going out and hiring an American. And what they say is, well, Americans don't want to do these jobs. I don't believe it. When you give them a level playing field, Americans will not only do the jobs, they will do it with exceptionalism and with integrity and honor. And so let's make the people who are following the rules, let's give them the opportunity to be successful. And those judges that aren't following the rules, I love the fact we went to arrest them. And I love the fact that we're going to keep holding them accountable.
What's going to happen to Muhammad? So we have his mugshot now. It looks like his face is half burned off. Here we go. What's going to happen to Muhammad? What's next, Corey?
So, the FBI has defined this as a domestic terrorism incident, which it absolutely is. And I agree with that 100%. So ICE has placed a detainer on this individual, meaning he will have his day in court in Colorado. And as you know, Benny, basically a sanctuary state. They don't want to even adhere to ICE detainers. So what you have seen and what your viewers have seen now, plainclothes ICE officers waiting in the courtroom so that when these liberal judges say you are free to go, we scoop you up right away. What would be much safer for our judges and for these individuals is they allow the ICE individuals to go into the jail where the person is secured in a safe facility, put the handcuffs on them, and then move them to a deportation status. But because these liberal judges and these sanctuary cities don't allow that, we have to have our resources standing in the courtroom. So when the judge will probably release this guy on some nominal bail, $5,000, $10,000, something simple, because these judges are so left-leaning, that this guy will walk out the door, and if we weren't there, he'd be a free man. We'd never see him again.
So you're telling me that, and we have footage of this actually happening right now, the plainclothes ICE officers arresting criminal aliens inside of courthouses, something that you have to resort to in sanctuary cities. Yeah, that's right, exactly right here. This is exactly what Corey's talking about. So you're telling me that DHS expects that judges will be lenient on this Muslim terrorist that just burned Americans alive? Well,
Benny, I only say that if history is any indication of what's going to happen in the future, right? We've seen it time and time again. Let me give you an example. There was a story about 7 years ago. There was a beautiful young girl in Iowa whose name was Sarah Root. She was killed by an illegal drunk driver who spent 3 hours in jail. He left and absconded back to his home country of Honduras. And only because of the support and persistence of Senator Joni Ernst did this administration, the Trump administration through Secretary Noem, go and grab that individual in Honduras 7 years later and bring that person back to be held accountable for the murder of that young, beautiful girl. So these judges let these criminals off all the time. And they say, well, it's only one little crime that they committed. No, it's multiple crimes. The first one was coming into the country illegally many times on numerous occasions. And then this one is a much more serious crime. So imperative for us to make sure that our resources are in the right location. So as soon as these leftist liberal judges decide that these people shouldn't be behind bars, we will put handcuffs on them. We'll put them in a facility that will not be as conducive as the one that they probably would have had in the Colorado County system. We will house them, and then we will deport them back to the country that they're from.
Is there going to be a major focus on visa overstays now, Corey? based on this attack? This
There
terror
has
attack?
to be. There has to be. And look, USCIS has now been empowered to go and look at all of these to make sure that anybody who's overstaying their visa, we're prioritizing to get them out of the country. But here's the other thing, Benny. Part of our problem is the way the law is written is, unfortunately, if you can say you've been in this country for longer than 2 years, a mere 2 years, we now have to go through this entire process of adjudication to get you out of the country. I say we go back 20 years. Okay. You pick a definitive date, January 1st, 2019. 2015, 2005. I don't care. 1919. I don't care what it is. If you came into the country illegally, you should be adjudicated immediately and sent out of this country. And so what has happened is the left has cared more about these criminals than they have American citizens. The American sentiment and people are with the Trump administration of getting these people out, the worst of the worst, the gang members. But these leftist liberal judges continue to impose their own will on the American people and just completely disregard the 77 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump to get this country to be safe again.
Really quickly, do you think that Mohammed should be facing civil rights charges on a federal level, should face potentially capital punishment on a federal level for this? I mean, we don't have any faith in Colorado working here. Tina Peters, of course, is still in jail in Colorado. Tina Peters will get a more severe sentence than Mohammed, we assume. But do you think that there's federal charges that can be brought here, Corey?
I think so. And from what I've heard, the Department of Justice is pursuing attempted murder or murder charges in 8 different cases. Now, no one has actually died yet, but is one of the pieces that they are pursuing. Look, you have to make an example of these people. And Benny, listen, I'm a guy, and I know, someone asked me, what's your favorite Bible verse? Mine is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Listen, whatever this guy did, maybe the only recourse is you do it back to him. This guy literally created a Molotov cocktail and threw it at people to light them on fire, to kill them. It is a brutal, I can only imagine, be a brutal way to die, to be burned to death or to have to live with those burns. If anyone's ever been to Shriners or any of these other places that these people are impacted by fire, it's just a devastating thing to somebody. This guy should be held to the fullest extent of the law. And I'll tell you what, we don't have a CCOT here, a prison like they do in El Salvador, but there's a special place in hell for a person like this.
Yeah, rightly so. What about finally, Corey here, what about the people that allowed this? Because Joe Biden and his team rubber stamped his visa, his work permit after overstaying his visa, after being here criminally. They wanted Mohammed, the terrorist, in the country to commit a flamethrower act of terrorism. What should befall that administration, either morally or legally?
Well, what is the accountability that we have for these people, right? I mean, look, when you go back and look at what Alejandro Mayorkas allowed to have happen, he lied to Congress and said he had no authority to prevent the border from being secured. What we will know, and what your listeners and viewers will see here in just a couple of days, Benny, is the individuals that the Biden administration actually kept off the known suspected terror list, which is amazing, right? They were pressured to keep certain individuals who should have been placed on that list off of the list for political realities. And that is devastating to me. So that's going to come here in the very near future. The fact that political expedience allowed them, for people who should have been placed on the list, to be kept off the list. And clearly a guy like this who should have been on the list, who never should have been let into the country, they just turned their cheek. They turned a blind eye to him. They let these criminals pour into our country to continue to perpetrate crimes against Americans with zero legal resource. Listen, I was part of that team, the fake Russian narrative that had to testify 7 times in front of Congress, that was held accountable, that I never did anything wrong. When do these people be held accountable? When are they dragged before Congress to say, you are now personally liable for the things that you did while you were in government service because you allowed these crimes to, if not actually happen, you allowed the people to come into this country because you didn't follow the rules?
That's some bombshell stuff, Corey. I have to ask a follow-up. So you're saying that Alejandro Mayorkas hid the identities of terrorists that were entering the country? This seems like a massive crime.
Benny, I will tell you this, that in the next 48 hours, you will see a story, hopefully, that is going to come out. That's going to show that there were people who should have been placed on the known suspected terror list that were not placed on that list because of political pressure directly to the department that was signed off by the highest levels of government. It's stunning information to me that is just coming to us, that goes to show you how broken the federal government system was under Biden and the fake auto pen and Alejandro Mayorkas and the entire administration, who covered up people coming into this country or should have been watched and weren't, because they had the political resources and the knowledge to go and talk to the right person. It's disgusting to me. And that's part of the reason our country's in such a mess. Luckily, we've got Donald Trump and his team coming in and fixing these things.
Corey, will there be charges on this? I mean, I can think of a number of charges that you could bring against the officials inside of the Biden administration, but this seems like a real bombshell. You've done decades in law enforcement. This is horrifying.
Well, I think the Department of Justice is going to have to look at this very closely. My concern is that those leaders, those cabinet secretaries, those individuals in government probably have some type of immunity in their official government capacity, but that should not hold them without accountability. And we should make sure that Congress gets to investigate this, that we bring these people forward. Who was really running the government, Benny, is the question. Who was behind the auto pen? Was it Jill Biden? Was it somebody else? And what we see now is every Democrat is coming out and they're saying, oh, Joe Biden was great when I saw him. He was great until the debate day. Give me a break. Everyone knew this was the worst cover-up since Watergate or even beyond that. And nobody's been held accountable. Not one person's been charged criminally. Not one person's been held to have to testify in front of Congress. And Joe Biden, we know, was not the president of the United States. So the real question was, who was making the decisions to let people like this into the country, and why aren't they being held accountable?
Yeah. Do you think that there were huge cartel payoffs? Do you think this was a massive criminal enterprise? Do you think people are getting paid off for this?
Look, I think this. I think the cartels know how to bring people into this country, and they had no opposition from the federal government. They were making billions and billions of dollars smuggling individuals in, human trafficking people. We saw male age, military age Chinese men pouring across the country with complete impunity, taking us over from within. It has been a true invasion of the United States of America. And it has been allowed to happen for the 4 years under the Biden administration because they didn't care about it. Either Joe didn't know about it or didn't want to stop it. Either way, someone should be held accountable for it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Corey, listen, just based, I'm sorry. If you allow me one more question, please. You brought up that they kept terrorists off the watch list. You've been working very closely with DHS, which oversees Secret Service. We learned in the Ryan Ralph filings that he was trying to smuggle in Afghani terrorists to kill Trump. He has a bunch of messages saying, hey, let's work with the cartels to smuggle a bunch of terrorists here and Stinger missiles and shoot Trump out of the sky. It's in the DOJ's filings. I'm sure you've seen this. You probably know so much more than we do about these multiple Trump assassinations. We can count at least 5 that I think would be considered like an assassin attempt on our president. Are we going to get full disclosures about Matthew Thomas Crooks, who he was working with, his emails, his text messages, his computers, his habits, photos of his room? Are we going to get like full disclosures on this stuff so we can finally unpack like how the hell we almost went into civil war and we ended Western civilization with an on-air execution of our president?
Benny, I think it's very clear that there's been a lot of shenanigans that have transpired, not just in the last 4 years, but in the last 4 decades, that the government has covered things up because they didn't think the American people had the right to know. And what I believe is that providing the information to the American people is the best solution. And by the way, let's hold people accountable. What we heard at the Butler rally was that the Secret Service couldn't communicate with the local PD, who couldn't communicate with the county PD. And we're going to put in some new standard operating procedures to fix that. We had a president of the United States, the leading candidate for president, shot in the head by what they told us was a lone gunman whose body disappeared in 15 seconds, Benny. Okay? The body was gone in 15 seconds. They had power wash the roof. Jesus, you can't get anything done that quickly. And all of a sudden it's done, and there's nothing here to follow up on, and we'll write a report to Congress. Let me tell you something. I know that President Trump, Kash Patel, Secretary Noem, and everybody else in the IC community wants to get the answers. And I'll tell you, Tulsi Gabbard has done a great job on this of pushing people to release information because the American people have the right to know, to make sure it never transpires again. So I believe in full transparency, and I hope that every agency that's been involved in any of these cover-ups is held accountable to the fullest extent of the law, because we saw Lisa Page and Schrock, right, the 2 lovers at the FBI, trying to single-handedly take down Donald Trump. And only because of the work of Kash Patel and Devin Nunes in the House and others were we able to uncover that. And the FBI is a better place because Kash Patel is there.
Yeah, I mean, we have this photo of Matthew Thomas Crooks on his phone right before he shot Trump. It's like we've never seen this phone. Do you have any idea what this phone is? Do you have any idea what all this evidence is? Who has it? Is it Tulsi?
I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure someone in the IC community has this.
Yeah.
But Benny, it raises a serious issue. Okay. How is it that we have the premier law enforcement organization in the world protecting the most important people of the world, and we still haven't seen a full report on what transpired at Butler 1 or at the golf course, in Florida? So
yes.
Look, they're saying that there's nothing to see here, and that may be the case. But full transparency to the government, from the government, I think is absolutely accountable. And it puts people at ease to make sure that they know, the American people know, that our president is safe on all occasions.
Wow. So you're saying that they were trying to just sweep it under the rug and say, oh, we cleaned it all up before you guys got into the office.
Well, it seemed to be that the previous administration didn't want to share any of that information, as you know. And so they had no interest in actually telling us what was transpiring at that Butler 1 rally.
Wow. There was DNA on the cocaine at the White House, Corey. Boy, they sure did destroy that evidence, too.
Next on my list, Benny, you took the words right out of my mouth. How is it? Look, the truth is,
Corey!
if there was hunters, he would have just smuggled it in like he smuggled everything else in through his nose. But so somebody actually left their cocaine in the locker and left it over the weekend. So I don't understand how that happened. And nobody's been arrested. Nobody's been held accountable. No one has gone to jail for it. And look, Benny, privately, as you know this, right? We had a purse snatching in our department that was pretty high profile. That took a week to figure out who the culprit was. Happened to be, as I know you're going to be shocked by this news, a person who was in the country illegally. Go figure.
Go figure. At least you didn't have a flamethrower this time. Goodness gracious. What a mess. We're so thankful. We often say this on the program, there is no greater hive of scum and villainy than the mess that had to be cleaned up at DHS. And we're so thankful for you and your team and Secretary Noem for going in and just cracking skulls. And I know there's a lot more work still to do, and we're here to give you air cover, man. Thank you, Corey, for all of your work. Everybody has to follow Corey here. He's got 600,000 subscribers on X, on to 1 million. Make sure they were fighting with the people who are fighting for you, Corey Lewandowski.
Thank you.
Godspeed.